Brown, your time has expired. Thank you. Senator Smith.
Very much, Madam Acting Deputy President. It's worth reminding people that today is the eve of the federal budget. Indeed, it's the first parliamentary sitting day since an extended recess where senators weren't on holiday, they were working in their constituencies. So the Labor Party, the Labor opposition in the Senate, had various options today when it came to question time. It could have attempted to present an alternative economic plan for the country, but it didn't. It could have tried to undermine the government's very, very successful response to the energy crisis, but it couldn't and it didn't. It could have tried to undermine the government's historic media reforms that were announced just days ago, but it didn't. It couldn't. Instead, we've had a very, very lacklustre campaign to try and undermine the government's historic, much-needed reforms to Australia's education system. And if you want to listen to people who are informed on this debate, then you can't go past my West Australian colleague, Senator Chris Back, who, in addition to his very wise and tempered contribution, did talk about his first-hand experience having been on the West Australian Catholic Education Commission for a long period of time. It's unfortunate the Hansard doesn't capture screeching and loud voices, because what we've heard thus far in this Take Note debate is screeching, is loud voices, but I'm sorry to inform senators on the other side that loud voices, screeching voices, don't make weak arguments stronger. So let's get to the substance of the issue. There are two particular points that, in the limited time available to me, I would like to highlight. The first is whether or not the previous Labor government did, in good faith, reflect David Gonski's education reform aspirations. And the answer to that is no. The answer to that is no. Secondly, I'd like to reflect on a part of the world that I know quite well, the federal electorate of Cowan. Indeed, Madam Acting Deputy President might know it well, in Perth's northern suburbs, and just detail for people what are the real dollar advantages to be achieved on the ground, in local schools, in a pretty tough part of Western Australia, I might add. And when I go through those schools, some of them are Catholic schools and they absolutely benefit. So let's just speak briefly, if I may, to the accusation that this government isn't living up to the David Gonski ambitions when it comes to education reform. And I just want to turn briefly to an article that Glenn Savage has written in The Conversation. Those of you who know Glenn Savage will know that he's from the Melbourne Graduate School of Education based at the University of Melbourne. So what does Glenn Savage have to say? Glenn says the new reform is good policy for two main reasons. First, it seeks, in principle at least, to correct some of the compromises and corruptions, his words, some of the compromises and corruptions that marred the original Gonski reforms, leading to many different deals being done across the nation and to a highly inconsistent application of the SRS. He goes on to say, secondly, states will only get funding if they agree to use the money for reforms proven to support better outcomes for students. This will broaden the focus from simply debating how much schools get to the equally important question of what schools do with the cash. Glenn Savage goes on to respond specifically to the issues around what it is that are the true aspirations and ambitions of David Gonski's education reforms for our country. And he goes on to say, the original Gonski review was designed to introduce a fairer, more transparent and needs-based federal funding model. If such a model had actually been produced, overfunded non-government schools would have lost some money. But this never happened. Instead, early in the review process, the Labor government promised that no school would lose $1, in quotation marks, as a result of the reforms. Instead of a needs-based model, Labor delivered a model that injected significantly more money into schooling but also protected the vested interests of Catholic and independent schools. There is simply no denying this fact. As original Gonski Review panellist member Ken Boston recently put it, the Gonski report was filleted and the flesh thrown away, leaving a deeply unfair set of arrangements. The Gonski report was filleted and the flesh thrown away, leaving a deeply unfair set of arrangements. So that's why this government has taken upon itself not just to embark upon a historic reform, but a historic reform that delivers fairness, transparency, equity and a needs-based approach
Thank you,
into
Senator
public
Smith.
education.
Your time has expired.